Good evening. I'm going to call the Board of Selectmen's meeting back to order, June 21st, 2021 at 6:30. We were in executive session tonight, starting at 6 o'clock, ending at 6:25, where we discussed collective bargaining for all town unions. No decisions were made. This will be ongoing conversations, as we have 3 unions that we're negotiating for now. With that, I would open up for a Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'm going to start with public comment and announcement. I have 2 before I call on anyone else. The first, we're announcing that there'll be a local liquor license establishment meeting Friday, June 25th, 2021 at 10 a.m. at the Harwich Police Department. So any of our liquor licenses are hopefully will attend. It's not mandatory yet, but we hope that they all show up. Second would be the June 28th Board of Selectmen's meeting, which will be 6:30 in this room. Will be to discuss the noise bylaws as well as the ad hoc noise containment committee report. That committee met for about a year, and they have a final report that they'll give us, and the board will take recommendations on going forward on policies and procedures related to noise and the noise bylaw with respect to the entertainment licenses, but the noise bylaw as a whole. Anyone here tonight for public comment and announcement? Just state your name for the record.
Sure. Good evening, Mark Kelleher, West Harwich. I'm here tonight because I read in the Chronicle that 2 new police officers are being advertised to be hired. And it brought me back to the early 70s, almost 50 years ago. I was a summer police officer here. I was primarily at the chuck wagon. They put the toughest guy there. Yeah, right. But I do remember I interfaced a lot with Chief Rainio, and I do remember Officer Gonzalez coming to see me, and I do remember that the police force kind of reflected the community at that point in time. And I don't have statistics, but I would just recommend to the board and through the board to the police chief that if not this new hires, that in future hires, they try to more reflect the composition of the town's population. If you look historically for Harwich, the Cape Verdean community was very important in this town. So I'd like to see that happen. I think it would be good for policing. The other thing is, I know that's not an easy thing to do, to recruit people from that community, but I remember in Boston and several other towns, they have a cadet program. It's a way to get people involved. It's a way for law enforcement to see if they want to keep these people. And they can do things like I did as a summer police officer, work traffic details or whatever. But I think there's a way to increase the amount of people from the underrepresented communities, for lack of a better word. And I think the town would benefit. I think policing would benefit. And I do recognize that it's a recruiting job. It's not an easy job. So thanks for hearing me out. Any questions? Oh.
Thank you, Mark. Any questions from the board? Don?
Hi, Mark. It's not so much of a question. The police chief met with Chairman McCaskill, myself, Joe Powers last week. We are committed to trying to work something out, and the police chief committed to having a meeting. I've already spoken with Albert Rainio. Hopefully we'll get Angie Chalaka involved with it too, and we're going to try to figure how to do an outreach to address that issue. But we did have that discussion.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Anyone else for public comment and announcement? Welcome back.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be back. Thank you for the opportunity. Carolyn Carey, Community Center Director. And I just wanted to let you all know about an opportunity that is coming up and made available to the town of Harwich. The Cape Symphony has received a grant from the Musicians Union to send symphony musicians in groups of 2 and 4 into the community to play outside on the afternoon of July 17th. They'll only be playing for 1 hour. It can be continuously an hour, or they can take 2 short breaks. And the terms of the grant were that they can't charge admissions, and there's no seating, and it has to be in a picturesque Cape Place. And they would like to do this at the Seaside Marketplace at Saquatucket Harbor for 1 hour on the 17th. What an exciting opportunity for us to have just a little strolling music. You can walk by, maybe grab your lunch, sit at the picnic tables, or I will fill you in on the times as soon as I get it, as they'll be strolling around. But I did want to let the town know that we were one of the places they'd like to come. So, thanks.
Thank you, Carolyn. Anyone else for public comment announcement? Okay, moving on to the consent agenda. Mary?
I move that we accept the resignation from Paula F. McGuire from the Youth Services Committee.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, new business.
With our gratitude.
Yeah, well, that- thank you, Don. On to new business.
I move that we vote to hold a public hearing for the alleged violations at Perks, 545 Route 28.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
I move that we vote to authorize the town administrator to be the hearing officer for the public hearing for alleged violations at Perks, 545 Route 28.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I move that we vote to approve the year-end budget transfers as authorized per Mass General Law, Chapter 22, Section 33B.
Chapter 44.
44.
44? 44.
The other one's only half as good.
Sorry about that. Chapter 44, Section 33B.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Carol, do you mind giving a brief overview of this for the public, please?
Good evening, Carol Coppola, Finance Director. At the end of each fiscal year, each community has the opportunity to transfer funds from one category, major category, such as salaries and wages or expenses, to cover over expenditures in particular line items. Mass General Law allows for this to happen within the last 2 months of the fiscal year or the first 15 days of the next fiscal year. And so before you tonight are 6 pages of budget adjustments. I realize that I think they were duplicated in your packet, so we certainly apologize for that. Those budget transfers include items such as salary and wage transfers for decisions that were made by the Board of Selectmen to increase an individual salary, to areas such as postage because of the extensive vote by mail that happened during the fiscal year. And so our budget, we found that the budget for postage was insufficient. We also have some over expenditures in snow and ice budgets. And so these are being covered with budget transfers. I know historically those were covered at town meeting with free cash, but we knew we were going to have available budget to transfer amounts to cover those kinds of expenses. And so that's what we've provided here. We have some other minor salaries and wages that for some positions such as the town engineer that just left, that we paid out, we're paying out the rest of the vacation time in excess of the salary that was provided in that budget. And then, construction and demolition and municipal solid waste have expanded greatly as we have more folks here in Harwich that are living full-time, and as such, that budget was in deficit, and so we transferred funds from salaries and wages of DPW down to the expense lines. And so that, in synopsis, is pretty much all of it. The only other one that I haven't covered for you this evening is the purchase of the restaurant equipment at Saquatucket Harbor for the Snack Shack, and that the town would like to enter into that agreement to purchase that. And so a budget transfer is presented for that as well.
Great. Thank you, Carol. Any questions from the board? Any questions from the public? Okay, we'll go to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. That's 3-0, Joe. Thank you, Carol. Next up is discussion Monomoy Regional School District Elementary School Assessment Inequity. I put this on the agenda. This is something that we talked about extensively last year. There was a small working group put together. And then I see Dr. Carpenter's with us, so I'm going to actually ask Dr. Carpenter to give us an update. Good evening.
Good evening. So Scott Carpenter, Monomoy Regional School Superintendent. So we have gotten, I guess, a legal briefing from our lawyer on the recommendation I had back in December, I believe. I was speaking before my board and was recommending to them that if we look historically at the assessments and how they've played out, and we look at the budgets as they pertain to the elementary schools, that it would be in Harwich's favor if we were assessing the towns differently and assessing the costs to run the two elementary schools to the town that owns the building, in part because it's a from an economic standpoint, it's an economies of scale. It's more cost effective to run a larger elementary school than a smaller elementary school, but the way the regional agreement is written and set up, it takes whatever costs the district has and apportions them purely by enrollment, and enrollment at the moment is running, roughly 3/4 for the town of Harwich and 1/4 for the town of Chatham. So I was just pointing out to my board that that there has been, since the district came together based on the regional agreement that founded Monomoy, this budgetary, what I refer to it as an inequity. So we have been working to come up with wording, and also working with the Department of Education to just to look at the wording that that we've been working through with our lawyer. And so we have feedback from the Department of Ed. We have that all teed up. We also have there's also another district that we found out there, Mount Greylock Regional, has a agreement that DESE approved that essentially is exactly like the proposal that we're talking about, where the two towns involved in Mount Greylock, for very much the same reasons, have structured it so that the towns are paying for the cost of the elementary schools, and then when the students come together into, we'll call it the more regionalized in terms of the students coming together into the same buildings at the middle school and high school, that they're split by enrollment. So there is a precedent out there in the state to do this, and so it appears that DESE's amenable to it. I think at the end of the day, our board needs to go vote on it. I think your board should ideally vote on it and then turn it over to Chatham. I don't know in terms of the logistics on what parties need to go look at the wording, get it all lined up, given that there's 3 different boards involved and 3 different councils and everything else, but that's where we currently sit with it.
Thank you, Dr. Carpenter. Questions from the board?
How long do you think that process will take?
In terms of the vetting piece,
Actually, the whole process, how long will it take it to get it approved and go into effect? Is this a...
so I think for the vetting piece, on our end, I think our board could, I think in the next month, move on approving wording. I guess my only hesitation is is the wording that gets approved going to be then bounced back, because of legal advice coming from either councils on the other. So I think there's there's those logistics. Then ultimately, we have to ship it off to the Department of Ed, which could take a couple months for them to get feedback back to us. But I think we're in a good place in that we can go and point out and say, hey, we're trying to follow an agreement that you approved just a couple years ago, following that same sort of methodology. So I'm hoping that can help streamline it, that this is not, creating something new. This is something that's already existing, that they've already approved.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Scott, this isn't anything newer than what I'd been saying 6 or 7 months ago, but what worries me is the trajectory of the enrollment as much as where it is right at this moment. You and I both know that the Chatham portion of that enrollment is projected to continue to decrease. I mean, we're staring at something close to 90-10 at some point. I'm not sure how much of an appetite the state has to continue to revise the agreement, but I am sure that if we're doing something, to Mary's point, that takes time, we also probably need to be addressing the bigger, longer-term issue that's more fundamental, because right now it's the elementary school. Tomorrow it'll be the middle school, and after that it's going to be the high school. So the way the formula works, even if the towns own their own elementary schools, the proportion is going to catch us to the point where each year you may only be asking for 1 or 2% for your own overall budget increase, but we're going to wind up owning about 5 to 7% as an increase, and Chatham might very well get a decrease.
Yeah, and I definitely hear you on that, Don. I think that I've kind of looked at, when I look at elementary school budgets, it's something that's in my bailiwick, and I can go and open up my budget and say, okay, put my finger on it. I think if there are other ways to go about assessment, and I think stepping back and looking at something bigger, I would actually argue I'm in the wrong sort of position for that, to make that decision. I think that needs to be a conversation between the two boards of selectmen and finance committees as to a different financial arrangement on that end. And there are districts out there, not many, but there are some districts. There's a district that's Manchester and Essex that looks at other aspects than enrollment to come up with how they assess the regional school district's budget. And because it's every year when I come to you and we are talking budget, I'm talking about the foundation enrollment, and that the foundation enrollment is what our regional agreement says that we're supposed to go and use to distribute the cost between the two towns. But before we talk foundation enrollment, we talk about this thing called minimum required contribution. So about half of our budget is based on minimum required contribution, and the other half is based on the rest, the outstanding costs for the operating budget is on this foundation enrollment equation that's in the regional agreement. But minimum required contribution is driven, and this is what I have shown you all in this past budget cycle, it's driven by enrollment. And then you have the rest of our budget is driven by enrollment. So the entire regional agreement as it's written is all enrollment based. And I think to get at what you're talking about, you'd have to work with two boards to bring a new thing to the towns that looks at other factors that aren't just enrollment based. Do you look at the populations of the two towns, or do you look at equalized property valuation of the two towns? So there are other factors that you can look at, but the regional agreement that was created when the district came together was based, I think, largely on most regional agreements, which is this whole enrollment concept but it doesn't take into account that some communities, and the community that I was with prior to coming here was similar, where there was one community that sent very few students to the school. It was an 87-13% split when I left it. And at the time I was talking to some about what I considered to be a little bit of an inequity when you just look at it from enrollment, because when in the town that's only sending 13% of the students, those properties, when you pull up Trulia or any real estate website, it wouldn't say, that Concord Carlisle is the school. It was Lincoln Sudbury. And you have that same thing here. It's that, the folks in Chatham and their properties benefit by having a solid school system. And, and I think that's what we can't lose sight of when the enrollment keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller, but you have an agreement that's fully based on what's the 3-year rolling average of enrollment in the district.
Don?
Thank you, Scott. I was just basically setting this up for the next discussion item, because we're not done, is my point. There are problems that transcend the one thing that we're working on to fix.
Yeah, and I do think, Don, that one of the things that you were asking is, does DESE have an appetite for us to go back and go back and go back? And I think the answer is yes. I mean, regional agreements are meant to have a 10-year review sort of built into them, so there's an expectation that you may go back and revisit. So we on our end had, we're at this sort of 10-year prefaces, and we're looking at bringing something forward, and which is why I was trying to get out ahead and say, hey, on my end, there's something I can clearly sort of put my finger on in my budget and just say, hey, this is something we should fix. That might fix one thing. I don't think it necessarily addresses the long-term piece that you're bringing up.
That's it? Yep. Scott, thank you for getting, Dr. Carpenter, thank you for getting to where we are. Can you share the legal opinion with this board?
Sure.
Through administration and the feedback with the school
Yeah,
board?
I'll send that to Joe tomorrow, and I'll also be happy to share with you, the 2 other agreements that I mentioned, just to give you a feel for what some towns are doing. As I said, there's one that's this Mount Greylock that has an agreement that's essentially exactly like I've been arguing, at least a fix at the elementary level. But there are some minor examples out there of towns that have looked very differently at a situation besides just pure enrollment factors.
Thank you. If we could get your board to vote this sooner rather than later, we can, and then present it to Chatham. Time is of the essence. There was about a $550,000 swing in our budget last year based on enrollment at the elementary school. So the sooner we can fix this, the better. And obviously, the 2 towns have to agree. I don't want to speak for Chatham, but I don't think they're going to volunteer to pay $550,000 more and escalating over the next 10 years. But we're going to have to get to the point where a decision has to be made. And if it's not made by the 2 towns, it will have to be made by the education boards. So the sooner we can have votes, the better.
Yep.
How many days away is town meeting, Joe?
314, but who's counting?
Thank you. So the sooner we can address this, the better.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you. Any comments from anyone else? Set? Thank you, Scott. Thank you for being here tonight. Next up is a discussion and possible vote for the Board of Selectmen to appoint a liaison to the Monomoy Regional School District Working Group based on assessment. Mary, you may not be aware, but due to the tragic loss of Stephen Ford, we lost our representative to this committee. And what it is a working group that works with Dr. Carpenter, the school committee, the Board of Selectmen in Chatham, and the Board of Selectmen in Harwich, kind of a go-between. So it's a very important role, and it's a role that we need to fill as soon as we can fill, so that we have a voice and we can get these working group meetings back together. Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Assuming she's willing to do it. I'd like to nominate Mary as Stephen's replacement for this. It's a very important job, so you're just not being thrown to the wolves.
I'd support that.
Did I miss a meeting?
If you did, you already would have been appointed.
I
You can
graciously accept.
Okay, I was going to say, you can decline.
Education is important. I spent some time with Scott, and I think it's an important issue. I'm happy to serve.
Okay, and we will give you the contact on who to get in touch with from
Okay,
the school
great.
committee and start working on this. But the sooner we do this, the better. Joe told us how long away town meeting is, which is not very far, and
Right.
our budget cycle starts soon, so thank you, Mary.
I move that we vote to execute the Division of Capital Asset Management and Maintenance Standard Contractor Evaluation Form for public building projects, and there's two. One is the Seekonk Heating Services, Inc., and the second is Dandis Contracting, Inc.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Joe, do you have?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, it might be worthwhile to take them separately. There was a reason for that on the agenda, and as you'll see and you'll hear from the chief, the scores are wildly different, so you may want to take them individually.
So the first motion and second were based on
item
Seekonk
one.
Heating Services?
Item 1.
Do I redo the motion? No.
No, that's fine.
That's fine.
Good
Thank
evening.
you. Good evening, Chief.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, it's nice to be standing here again. I'm tired of sitting on my couch looking at a computer. So with these two contracts, just for the public in general, the decant process and how the building is built, we have what are called filed sub-bids, which are the subcontractors submit a bid for their piece of the project. The town takes the bids, usually it's lowest bid, unless there's a reason not to take the lowest bidder. Then we hire a general contractor who develops a price based on those individual contracts. So the bad part of that is the contractor doesn't get to pick his subs. So you end up kind of with this potpourri of workers that get the thing done. The good part of that is there's an evaluation process at the end that lets us kind of hold the subs accountable for the work they did or didn't do. So the first one, Seekonk Heating, it's the scores out of 100. And if you can see, and I will apologize, the first one that was submitted, you have a corrected one. I got it up to Danielle this afternoon. There was two categories. Selectperson Anderson pointed out that we had double marked on two categories. It was a lower score on both of them, and they did not receive a satisfactory score from the town of Harwich based on primarily Sean Liddy's evaluation. Sean and I talked at length. We are still working on issues with the heating system, ultimately heating and cooling. Ultimately, everything works. There's one piece that remains outstanding they're supposed to be fixing, but the contractor was not responsive to our needs, doesn't communicate well, and generally the score that you reflect, the 78, is a reflection of the work that was done. The product was good, just dealing with the contractor wasn't good. So that's what the first one is.
Thank you, Chief. Any comments on that, Mary?
Just one question. By virtue now of having that said below 80 was a failing score, does that mean you don't have to use them the next time?
So I'm not sure where that next part, I believe they can appeal their score, and there's some pushback, and it's not just us using them. So I think it's the totality of their scores. Wellfleet's used them, Brewster's used them, other towns have used them. So I think it's our score would not, I don't believe, prevent them from being used again, but it certainly would weigh in and give somebody some pause if they were looking at them to maybe investigate a little bit further.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other discussion? Joe, anything to add?
Just that, as the chief had said, in this particular example, they're a subcontractor, but given that the town knows that they had subpar performance, if there was some contract that the town went out for bids on, and they responded and they were the low bidder, we could use this information to disqualify them. So it's a completely different procurement method than what we're talking about right now. This is Chapter 149. That would be more if we did a Chapter 30B or 7, but it could still be used by the town because it's knowledge that we gained.
Thank you. Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to be clear, us voting yes on this affirms the scoring outcome on this.
Right. With no other discussion, I'll call for a vote on this. All in favor?
Aye.
I'm an aye. That's 3-0, Joe. And can I get the same motion, Mary, for the
I
next one?
move that we vote to execute the Division of Capital Asset Management and Maintenance Standard Contractor Evaluation Form for public building project done by Dandis Contracting, Inc.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion? Chief?
This was the painting contractor. I would say the only issues that we had with them were really less their fault and was done by the way the building was phased. So they were actually in painting while construction was going on in the room next door. So some work had to be redone. They were super responsive. They worked weekends, they worked nights, they worked all the time, and they got the project done. And again, Sean Libby and I went through this. I mean, I'm very comfortable with the score we gave them.
Thank you, Chief. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. 3-0, Joe?
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Ready?
Yes.
I move that we vote to approve a new weekday and Sunday entertainment license for miniature golf, Bud's Miniature Golf, 9 Sisson Road, 10 a.m. to 10:30 p.m., pending Building Fund Department and Fire Department approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Don?
Yeah, this is nothing new, but I mean, I'm just noticing again that we're needing to get the building commissioner to opine on something. It just seems like there's an awful lot of these things that aren't being acted on.
Message sent, Joe?
Understood.
Thank you. Any other discussion from anyone in the public? All in favor?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. 3-0, Joe?
I move that we vote for the board to execute the lease termination and mutual release agreement for Dockside Seafood Shack LLC.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion? Joe?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. I had an opportunity last week to get into the restaurant and, or the snack shack, excuse me, and verify the condition of the materials. I know that the chair had worked with Attorney Kelly on this. I think this is the best arrangement for all parties involved. And it's my understanding that this gives some relief and comfort to the Griffiths family as they struggle with the loss of their father and the head of the corporation here. I would urge the board to sign this, and as Carol had indicated under a previous item, we do have funding available to acquire the equipment and then begin the next step of having services rendered from that snack shack this year for boaters and the general public in advance of a broader RFP for multiple years.
Thank you, Joe. Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. While I totally agree with that, I might ask Mary to add to her motion and authorize the chair to sign.
So moved.
Right, that was my second, too.
Thank you. Any other discussion? The only discussion I would have is the only line item that changed from Attorney Kelly and I's discussion was the donation portion of this. We've agreed to purchase the equipment for $25,000 as way as payment, and then we agreed to give a donation letter for the difference. And what we discussed was $15,000. That's changed to $25,000. The materials inside the building, the receipts add up to $80,000, and there's some dry goods upstairs. So there's more value than the $80,000 minus depreciation. I don't personally, it doesn't matter to me that it's $25,000, but I want the board to know that that line item changed. And as long as the board's all right with it, we've voted as is.
I'm okay.
Me too.
Any discussion from anyone in the public? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I'm an aye. 3-0, Joe?
Thank you.
Thank you. Old business, Snack Shack update. Joe, this one will be yours.
So as I just mentioned, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, with that agreement being executed by the board, once you sign and by representatives of the Griffiths family, that will allow us to proceed on next steps on the Snack Shack. We are contemplating any number of opportunities. I've been apprised of another opportunity this evening from board members that's worth pursuing. But I think the bottom line is we can now move forward with all speed to get some sort of operation going in there for the benefit of the public sooner rather than later. I imagine it may be something as relatively simple as either a license agreement to be approved by this board or something even of less legal magnitude, meaning the town take on more of the operation. And again, I think the bigger issue is the longer-term RFP, which we will also work on immediately so that we have that in place. As you know, we have an expiring operation at the golf course that expires at the end of this season, so to have an opportunity to advertise these two establishments with equipment, I think could be very beneficial, not only for the purveyors of those establishments, but for the town.
Thank you, Joe. Questions or comments from the board? So, Joe, the 28th meeting is primarily dedicated to noise, but it's not the only topic that will be on that agenda. Is it possible for us to get something to vote to put in the paper on the 28th? On the meeting on the 28th?
Sure, I would say it's possible. I think we just have to figure out specific next steps. You know, if the board wants to go the route of a food truck, I could get something in that order together through a memo for the board if we were looking to do either a combination of fundraising efforts on behalf of town events, town groups and all that. It might take another week.
Okay. It's not going to be a perfect scenario either way, but I think if we can get something next week that we can advertise, that would be great. Mary, do you want to share the conversation that you had and the idea that you had?
Yeah, it's not my idea. John Mahan called me and just threw out the idea of offering this to the high school, either the senior class or the junior class or the combined group of them, to sell real snacks. Have them go to BJ's, get some packaged things, so no serve safe required. They mark it up a little, they sell it, and they make some money for their prom or their class trip or whatever. I thought it was a pretty neat idea, and a few of my fellow members here do as well. So that's one of the things Joe's looking at.
Thank you, Mary. With the board's permission, I'd like to, through Joe, work with the harbor master. This is obviously directly affects him. But before we put it on the agenda on the 28th, I'd like to have the conversation and kick ideas around and hear from John any ideas he has. Is that okay?
Sure.
Thank you. All right, moving on to Hall's Path update. There really is no update, other than there's a planning board meeting on it tomorrow night at 6:30 in this room. The board is still waiting for opinions from legal, both on the titles as well as the clearing that was done. So there's really no update from the board yet. Joe, anything to add?
Nothing to add, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Contracts. If we can just read through these, Mary, if...
One at a time.
Yes, please.
I move that we vote to execute a contract with Wood Company Machinery, Inc. for the purchase of a Volvo 390H loader, couple and bucket, front end.
L90.
What's that?
L90H.
L90H loader, couple and bucket, front end loader for $172,159.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Go ahead, Joe.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I just want to bear out, as you can see in the Assistant Town Administrator's memorandum, that this is a procurement that relates to an article at this year's annual town meeting. I'm just thrilled to be able to highlight that because it gets to the speed with which we're able to get into procurement now. And that's a testament to our former colleague Griffin Ryder and certainly Megan and the department heads and everybody involved.
Thank you, Joe. Moved and seconded. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 3-0, Joe.
I move that we vote to execute a contract with Sutphen Corporation for the purchase of a Sutphen heavy-duty 100-foot mid-mount aerial ladder quint fire truck, $1,086,672.80.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Don?
Yeah, I just want to take this opportunity again to thank the fire department because they were extremely patient. They went through an entire town meeting cycle deferring this even after they had promised to decommission 2 trucks in order to get the 1 truck back. So we're very appreciative of the way the fire department has worked with us.
Mary?
What Don said.
Chief, do you want to say anything?
Just real quick, not to belabor it, but this is a little bit timely as a price increase happens July 15th, of course. So thank you for getting this on the agenda, getting it done. You know, I think we're in good shape. With this, obviously, we're losing a vehicle. We think we can manage that through operations, so I don't see any problems with that. And this spec has been long worked on, and actually, believe it or not, the delay might have helped us a little bit because we made some more changes with this last revision of specifications that I think will make it a better vehicle for the town and certainly serve the town for another 30 years to come. So, well done. Started under my predecessor, and you know, we'll get it done and move forward.
Great. Thank you, Chief. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 3-0, Joe?
I move that we vote to approve Boston Marine Insurance Services, Inc., marine insurance coverage for fiscal year 2022 in the amount of $97,089.
Second.
Moved in second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 3-0, Joe?
I move that we vote to execute a contract for dog impoundment services with the Animal Rescue League in the amount of $7,000.
Second.
Moved in second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
3-0.
Next one at a time? Or
Nope, you can do all three
all
together.
I move that we vote to execute grant agreements for Community Preservation Act projects authorized at the 2021 Annual Town Meeting. First is Cape and Islands Veterans Outreach Center in the amount of $15,000. Second is the Community Development Partnership in the amount of $7,500. And third is the Harwich Affordable Housing Trust in the amount of $50,000.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Don, would you do a quick overview of what this is as the liaison to this committee?
Yeah, the quick answer is there is no town staffing to support the activities of the Affordable Housing Trust, and we've been operating on grants from year to year with the CPC to provide staffing support.
Yeah, and the agreements, the grant agreements, Don, as the CPC liaison, do you want to say what the grant agreements are?
Yeah, well, the grant agreements are codification. In the past, they hadn't been doing this, but they nailed down the circumstances for which the money was given, and each party has to agree to what the scope of their work is, and their obligation to pursue certain items. If it was building a building, they actually have to execute contracts to get to that point. In the case for the trust, there would be staff support. You would have to execute a contract to do that, but it's a bilateral codification of the arrangement with the CPC, so that everybody knows what the deal is.
Thank you. Any questions? Joe?
Just to add, Mr. Chairman, each of these grant agreements, the corresponding motions at town meeting made reference that the Board of Selectmen through CPC would be executing these.
Thank you. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. 3-0.
I move that we vote to authorize the chair to execute fiscal year 2022 Visiting Nurse Association VNA contract in the amount of $4,000.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 3-0. Town Administrator's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have 3 items to bring before the board this evening. The first is just to put out there affirmatively what towns, plural, received from the Alcoholic Beverage Control Commission last week based on Governor Baker's signing into law an act relative to certain COVID-19 measures. As I've said before, these are sent out directly to the licensed establishments, but the town also makes reference to it on behalf of you all as the local licensing authority. Specifically, it's the expansion of patio service and takeaway/delivery of alcohol by on-premise licensees. As we may have heard from the news coverage last week, patios and outdoor expansion licensees that have been approved may continue their outdoor operations until April 1st, 2022, and takeaway or delivery of alcohol establishments that have been licensed for on-premise consumption of alcohol may continue, that is assuming they're already doing it, takeaway and delivery of sales of alcohol until May 1st, 2022. So again, that has now become law as signed by Governor Baker on June 16th. The next item, the board received an email, I believe, late today.
Joe,
Sorry.
go ahead, Don.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before you go into that, Joe, just to be clear with everybody who hasn't been following this, we did not do a blanket expansion to outdoor service for every establishment in town. To that extent, it's only the licenses that we had approved that would be eligible for the continuation.
Correct. The ones that had applied and reapplied were the
Yes.
ones that it impacts. Thank you.
And just to further that, the control really still is with the Board of Selectmen. This is an addition, not something that's granted automatically by the state. Still
Correct.
approved by the Board of Selectmen.
Still devolves to the local licensing authority.
Thank you, Joe.
We received an email late Thursday evening and a packet in the mail today from the Cape Light Compact. They are looking to have municipalities consider amendments they're proposing to the compact's first amended and restated joint powers agreement that exists between the compact and the municipalities that are part of that. This will be in the board's packet on June 28th, simply for your review, and if the board wants to raise any concerns or objections, the compact is scheduled to take a vote on these proposed amendments at their meeting on July 12th. Otherwise, we would have held it off until that board meeting. And then the last item I have, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, is a notice that we received this evening from Eversource that it is a bit of a late notice, but I think it's worth mentioning tonight, and also that it will be posted on our website. Eversource will be hosting a free webinar for anyone that is having difficulty or anticipates difficulty paying their Eversource bills. The webinar will take place on Wednesday, June 23rd at noon time, and it's meant to give folks that are having some financial difficulties some solutions regarding fuel assistance, extended payment plans, rental assistance programs, and things of that nature. So again, Eversource will be running a free webinar regarding folks that may be having difficulty paying their utility bills, and again, that'll be posted on our website on Tuesday for folks to have more information on the program. And that concludes my update, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Joe. Don, Selectmen's report?
Just to note that it just seems like the in-person meetings go much faster than the ones that used to be online. That's my report.
Mary?
Just a quick report. I attended the open house at the Chase Library last week, and I've been in town 16 years, and it's the first time I went in the building, but it is well worth the trip from all the way out in East Harwich to see it. Just a lovely building, and obviously a very dedicated, I forget her last name, but Claire, who retired, obviously put her whole heart and soul into the library.
Thank you, Mary. I have no report, so motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.